Life changed in southeastern North Carolina 70 years ago this week. The area's first television station, WMFD, which would later become WECT, signed on the air April 9th, 1954. All this week, we're going to celebrate WECT's 70th anniversary by looking back at each decade of the station's history and how we've become your trusted source for news and entertainment. When WMFD-TV went on the air April 9, 1954, it became just the 7th television station in North Carolina at the time, broadcasting 5 hours of programming a day. The first hour or so of every day was this picture, the test pattern. People would use it to adjust their antennas and try to get the best reception. As for what was on TV back then, there wasn't much. The station aired several network shows on delay, since they could not be received live. The station also aired several local shows from the studio along Princess Street downtown, including one called Song Shop. The host would play music records and even show film clips of some of the performers. Call it an early version of MTV. Wayne Jackson was one of the station's earliest personalities. He hosted a show called Relax with Jax.
I talked to anyone who had anything interesting to say on practically any subject. One of the most interesting guests was baseball star Jackie Robinson. And one of the nicest things about those early days was the fact that we could do anything we wanted. Nothing had ever been done before.
Your SO Reporter was the early version of a local newscast, which also included weather and sports. Not long after the station went on the air, the team had a major news event. Hurricane Hazel devastated the Carolina coast October 15th of 1954, making landfall at the state line, a Category 4 storm with winds peaked at 134 miles per hour. Hurricane Hazel killed 19 people and destroyed 15,000 homes in North Carolina. In 1955, WMFD-TV became part of the NBC network, and that's when nighttime entertainment programs went from being delayed to airing live. 1955 also brought WMFD-TV's first remote broadcast, live coverage of the Azalea Festival Parade. The staff took the station's only camera out of the studio to a street-side platform. They draped cables over several rooftops and then reconnected them in order just to make that broadcast happen. Atlantic Telecasting Corporation bought WMFD-TV in 1957. A year later, the call letters changed to WECT.
We continue our look back over the past 7 decades as we continue our celebration of WECT's 70th anniversary on air. The 1980s was a game changer. We transitioned from typewriters in the newsroom to computers. The way we recorded video went to a new format. And for the first time, we were looking at significant competition ahead with cable.
In the early 80s, we had like 13 channels in the realm of cable.
Bill Cameron came to WECT in 1982 as the chief operating officer. But he had been with the station since he was born. His father, Dan Cameron, owned the station with his brother Bruce. He recalls how local television was then having to compete with new options on the big tube.
Ted Turner was just getting started with TNT and his networks and that sort of thing.
WECT, Channel 6, Wilmington.
It was in the 80s WECT had to make room for more nationally syndicated shows.
Our programming, if I remember right, we were running MASH and the Jeffersons from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock on weekdays.
Then on September 20th, 1984, the first episode of The Cosby Show aired. It was an instant hit. It was an NBC program. WECT was an NBC affiliate. It was gold. In addition to the morning and evening news, local programming had been WECT's claim to fame. Long before the Oprah Winfrey Show, there was the Jim Burns Show. It was enormously popular for over 2 decades. But nothing took daytime television by storm, like the Oprah Winfrey Show, which debuted on September 8, 1986. The show was in syndication, and WECT, the NBC affiliate, was fortunate to get it. Oprah came on at 4, a huge lead-in for our evening newscast.
This is WECT News Center at 6.
The 80s was truly a turning point for WECT and the entire television industry. For the first time in television history, people of color were taking prominent spots.
The city must be responsible for its property.
The same year Oprah made her debut, WECT promoted a young reporter to become the first African American to anchor the evening news in southeastern North Carolina. That would be yours truly.
Good evening, I'm Ken Murphy.
I'm Frances Weller.
Then there was another Wilmington kid who made the news quite often. Michael Jordan, who grew up on Gordon Road, attended Laney High School, then UNC, and would go on to become the greatest basketball player of all time. Then another history-making moment for Wilmington that was major news for WECT, the first black queen for the North Carolina Azalea Festival.
Bill Cosby was a great show during my time at the TV station. And Felicia Ayers Allen, the #1 female role on television, was the Azalea Queen. That was big to do. I mean, that was really big time, and she was NBC, so she came to the station, and that was fun.
Technology was advancing at a rapid pace starting in the early 80s. In 1982, Sony came out with its Betacam, a half-inch tape, which was a dream at the time for photographers shooting video for news and commercials. But WECT was competitive, a state-of-the-art television station, so that format would change before the decade was over. In 1984, we moved to getting our signal by satellite. That year, we had 20 people on staff in the newsroom and more than 9 hours of locally produced newscasts every week. It was in the 80s when we were able to do live remotes on location. At the time, we thought WECT had really gone futuristic.
That was when we got our first live unit. We got the van with live capability, but it was an ordeal to do that. And now you go out with your phone and you can be live anywhere.
There were significant changes in the newsroom. We would move from typewriters to computers. We had finally arrived in the future, and we needed to. There were major news stories happening locally, nationally, and internationally, and our viewers counted on us to report it. National stories like the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion on January 28, 1986. Perhaps the biggest news story of the decade was the construction of I-40 in Wilmington. Truly one of the biggest historical moments in WECT and Wilmington history. It was in the latter part of the 1980s that construction on undoubtedly the most important road project in Wilmington began. I-40 officially opened in 1990. Tomorrow night, we'll talk about that and some of the other news-making moments in the 90s as we continue celebrating WECT's 70 years on air.
You know, it's hard to imagine life in the Wilmington area without Interstate 40. But the last segment of that highway between Wilmington and Raleigh did not open until 1990. And Wilmington's population has more than doubled since. We continue our week-long celebration of WECT's 70th anniversary now by looking at the decade of the 90s, which brought tragedy to one well-known family and several hard hits from Mother Nature. The decade began with an event that would transform Wilmington and New Hanover County.
We're linked together now with a commitment for a strategic network of 4-lane, limited access, divided highways reaching within 10 miles of over 96% of our entire population.
More than 2,000 people showed up on June 29, 1990. To watch Governor Jim Martin cut the ribbon on the last 122-mile segment of Interstate 40, connecting Raleigh to Wilmington.
And liftoff of Endeavour on America's 50th space shuttle flight.
Curtis Brown took a different road in the 1990s. the native of Elizabethtown, piloted the Space Shuttle Endeavour on its mission in September of 1992. The first of 6 shuttle flights the NASA astronaut from Bladen County would take in the decade. The airport in Commander Brown's hometown bears his name. From flying into the stars to hosting a star. Recognize this young lady? That's Kelly Ripa, queen of the 1993 Azalea Festival. 8 years before she went from soap opera star on All My Children to co-hosting Live with Regis and Kelly.
Every time I say, well, it can't get any better than this, it gets better and better and better, and the people here are so wonderful.
Wilmington native Michael Jordan won his 3rd NBA championship with the Chicago Bulls in June of 1993. But 1 month later, tragedy struck the Jordan family. 2 teenagers shot and killed Michael's father, James Jordan, and dumped his body in a swamp in South Carolina. In August, the family laid James Jordan to rest.
Relatives and friends say they're relieved arrests have been made in Jordan's murder. However, that's likely little comfort knowing he died so violently and much too soon.
Jordan's remains were carried by family and friends for burial just beside the family church. The Jordans say the tragedy brought them all together to mourn his death, but they say they would be remiss if they did not also take the opportunity to celebrate his life.
After being southeastern North Carolina's congressman for nearly a quarter century, Charlie Rose stepped down as the 7th District Representative in 1997. Lumberton attorney Mike McIntyre won the seat and held it for 18 years.
All right, here we go, and background.
WECT went behind the scenes to capture the excitement of the TV series Dawson's Creek, which made its debut in 1998 and ran for 6 seasons, shooting around Wilmington and the area beaches. It made household names of several stars like James Van Der Beek and Katie Holmes. Nothing defined news in the late 1990s like the pounding our coast took from hurricanes. It began in July of '96 when Bertha landed at the New Hanover-Pender County line, bringing winds stronger than 100 miles per hour. It tore apart piers along our coast, leaving residents shell-shocked at the damage.
I woke up about 4:30 this morning, and when I looked out here, I couldn't believe it. It looked like a war zone.
Just 2 months later, September 5th, Hurricane Fran landed near Southport, packing 115-mile-per-hour winds and a storm surge 12 feet high. It left the steeple from the First Baptist Church sitting on Market Street. Fran killed 22 people and had one man thinking he would not survive.
Yes, sir. This is the 911 center at the Sheriff's Department.
Hi, yeah, I want to give a message for my next of kin.
Okay.
I'm on Carolina Beach at the north end.
How is it there, sir?
I don't think we're going to make it. It's just about, it's up to our porch and how everything's gone. The building's starting to fall apart.
I didn't know what else to do. I thought we were going to die at the time. And what I was watching was cars and dumpsters, and the building was shaking, and we were hiding in the bathroom and all huddling up, and I didn't think we were going to make it.
Less than 2 years later, in August of 1998, Hurricane Bonnie made landfall near Surf City with 110-mile-per-hour winds. Damages in our coastal counties topped $40 million. But it was Hurricane Floyd in September of 1999 that rewrote the record books. The storm brought wind gusts higher than 100 miles per hour, damaging coastal homes and businesses. But the rains, up to 2 feet, caused massive flooding inland.
On Friday, a lot of residents brought their cars up the road to right here because it was higher ground. But if you look at that top right there, that's a truck underwater. There's no such thing as higher ground anymore. No one knew that water would get this high.
Rivers crested at 2 times their flood stage.
This mobile home over here where my uncle lives, there was only about this much of it sticking out beyond the water. He lost everything he's got.
She's lost her house. It's got 7 inches of water in it. It's a trailer. And of course, it's no more good.
35 people died, and some estimates put the damage at more than $4 billion.
Take a minute to think about how many things you still have around your house that are 70 years old. I bet not too many. Things seem to change so quickly. It's often out with the old and in with the new. But WECT is still here, bringing you the news that matters to you. Let's take a look back at some of the big stories we shared with you in the 2000s. At the turn of the century, after surviving the big scare of Y2K and computers crashing, our dependency on computers took off. Google became the dominant search engine. By 2004, people were searching in Google 200 million times a day. Then came high-speed internet, which wasn't accessible to everyone. That prompted a visit to Whiteville from then-President Bill Clinton.
You hear all about this digital divide. Some of you got a computer and some don't. And even if you do, maybe you use the internet with your telephone line and maybe you don't.
In 2008, Clinton's wife Hillary and Barack Obama would be in Wilmington campaigning before the presidential primary. In 2001, we all watched in horror the terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers in New York, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. While network news took over coverage, local stations like WECT worked to find a local connection. In the years that followed, Buddy Martinette, a command officer for an urban search and rescue team who responded to the Pentagon that day, would become Wilmington's new fire chief, sharing his memories of that tragic day.
Some of those victims didn't even have a chance to get out of their chairs. And as a matter of fact, I remember in particular an Army officer that still had creases in his uniform with his key card in his hand, sitting in his chair at his desk, and never even had a chance to get up and leave.
But the decade would not be defined by tragedy. We saw some big changes at the North Carolina Aquarium at Fort Fisher. 2002, after 2 years and $17 million in renovations, the aquarium reopened with a 235,000-gallon, two-story tank that's become a focal point for viewing fish, sharks, and other sea creatures. In 2003, we said goodbye to Dawson's Creek, a popular TV series filmed in Wilmington, and hello to another popular series, One Tree Hill. Producers and actors loved the area.
Come into a small, secluded place where the people in the community are used to this, so nobody's going to bug you. Nobody's going to, be freaked out. I mean, everybody here is just so cool.
You cannot get from one set to one location to another in Los Angeles and make those kind of company moves. We make 3 company moves in a day.
In 2009, then Governor Beverly Perdue visited the set of One Tree Hill at Screen Gem Studios to reauthorize the North Carolina Film Council.
Action.
And film incentives would go from 15% to 25%, bringing more jobs to the state and Wilmington, helping set a path for future TV and movie productions. Those weren't the only changes on TV, especially here at WECT. I joined the news team as a co-anchor on Carolina in the Morning with Bob Townsend in 2006. While my 18 years here is only a small portion of WECT's 70 years on the air, one thing is for certain, our pledge to bring you the news that affects your family will never change. Kim Ratcliffe, WECT News.
I have to say I am thoroughly enjoying looking back on what has happened over the past few decades.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And the 2000s was very interesting.
Yeah, and I remember, do you remember, because I think you did, I had to work New Year's Eve, 1999 to 2000. I think we all did.
Yes.
Because we were all like, what's going to happen?
Yes.
You remember that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
And you look at that now.
People were taking all of their money out of the banks.
Yeah, and you look back at it now with, what we have in devices and everything else like that. But, it is kind of fun to look back and remember, yeah, I was there when the century changed.
It did. And of course, we will never forget Dawson's Creek and One Tree Hill.
Yeah.
Really putting Wilmington
really
on the map.
impacted here.